Good afternoon, Board and Dr. McKnight. I am here today as a voice for parents in my community. Many of them are actually working today and unable to attend. Parents in my community are frustrated. They are finding out that educators and administrators are going behind what they are teaching their kids at home and pushing ideas of gender ideology on their kids instead of teaching them the traditional areas of study in which these teachers are trained. For example, in second grade, a new benchmark curriculum book was presented, My Rainbow. The description that you provided to the parents hides actually the true subject matter of the book, and after reading it, it is all about an autistic girl who wants to be transgender. The transgender ideology is throughout the whole entire book. What is most appalling are the responses the teachers have been directed to provide to the students who actually speak up and ask questions. One example that was given, if a child asks, well, that's weird, he can't be a boy if he was a girl. You have encouraged teachers through your administration to say, well, when we're born, people make a guess about our gender and label us boy or girl based on our body parts. This actually undermines any teaching or viewpoint that many families in your community have used at home. You have inserted what only you want the kids to hear, thereby implying to them that their religion, their belief system, and their family tradition is actually wrong. By doing so, I believe that you have overstepped your bounds. Many parents have also voiced concerns that are pushing ideas and thoughts dictated solely by your board and administrators and principals and not allowing our kids to actually think for themselves. This is not education, it is indoctrination. We already have a dramatic mental illness increase in our kids. Perhaps we have put adult content on our kids' minds at a far too young of age. To the parents listening, please be aware that these lessons were told by many principals to be kept from the parents. I believe that full discretion and full transparency should be the board of any board of education. Thank you for your time.
Wow. So, Rosalind, could you tell us who that was that spoke and what the context was behind that?
Absolutely. That is the founder and former chair of our Montgomery County chapter of Moms for Liberty, speaking up in January of 2023. She was the first public comment at board testifying. Things really ramped up in the summer of 2023 with additional, I think I counted 67 different testimonies about this. But she was that first, and actually Alito, in his opinion in this majority, he quoted from her testimony in January 2025. So it's amazing the power of parents.
And I should start off, I wanted you to put that into context, but we are here to discuss I was just in DC with you on Friday, June 27th, in which history was made. The decision in Mahmoud v. Taylor was released by the U.S. Supreme Court, and in it, parents won. We won big. Because in the 6-3 decision, Justice Samuel Alito wrote the majority opinion, and he affirmed the fundamental right of parents to direct the care, the upbringing, and that includes the education of their children, and reaffirmed that parents have the ability to opt their kids out of instruction if that instruction interferes with their deeply held religious beliefs. I hope I said that right, because we're here with Cory Brewer, attorney with Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, and Rosalind Hanson, a Montgomery County mom who was a plaintiff in this case. So thanks for joining us, guys. I really appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to start with you, Cory. As an attorney, and you can describe that you, this is your bread and butter. You deal with education and public interest law. So tell us what your thoughts are on this decision.
Yeah, thank you. So my role at Will here is I'm one of our attorneys, and I do some litigating and also some kind of legal and policy hybrid work. So we certainly want to be empowering parents and school boards and educators to know what the law is, what their rights are, and what they can do about it. And to that end, this case is huge. This decision is really a landmark decision. And it's really great news for parents, as you mentioned, Scarlett, because as the majority wrote, the use of these, they call them LGBTQ inclusive storybooks. And I'm sure, as we'll get to, it wasn't simply storybooks that were at issue. There were so many other facts that had to go with it. One of the things that the majority writes about is that teachers were actually trained to silence dissent and push back against norms. I'm sure, Rosalind, you can talk about that a little bit more too. But I mean, this was something that obviously a lot of parents had concerns about. And what this decision ultimately held was that if there's instruction that substantially interferes with the religious development of children and imposes the kind of burden on religious exercise that the Supreme Court found unacceptable, if we go back more than 50 years in a case called Wisconsin versus Yoder, that type of required instruction without allowing parents an opportunity to opt their children out, that burdens the right to direct the religious upbringing of their children, and therefore it burdens their First Amendment freedom of religion.
Yeah, in the 41-page opinion that was accompanied by a bunch of color reproductions of the books in question, Alito explained that the school board's use of the storybooks, along with the decision to withhold notice to parents and forbid opt-outs, did substantially interfere with the religious development of their children. And you witnessed that firsthand. Okay, so tell us what you experienced, Rosalind. When did it first come to your attention that this was happening in your son's school?
Well, so it was happening in all of the schools, the introduction of the LGBTQ inclusive books. And it was under the guise of kindness and respect and inclusion. But as Cory has mentioned, and as we've stated, nature of this wasn't just mere exposure. This was coercion, right, to disrupt. And some of the teacher manual language even said that the teachers were instructed to disrupt either or thinking. These books were intentionally chosen by specialists. I'll use that in an air quote, literature specialists, handpicked by Montgomery County Public School staff. Some of them are trained specifically in how to disrupt either or thinking when it comes to cis heteronormative activity. And so they didn't come to the table from the very beginning thinking about what does this look like for our religiously diverse county. They went to people who would celebrate and support the narrative and the storybooks, right? And you can see that in the books that were picked, right? Again and again, the theme is celebration and joy, which, while we live in a pluralistic society and everyone has the right to get married, that doesn't mean that everyone with religious beliefs also wants to celebrate that. And so there was a big miss from the very beginning on how these books were selected and the staff members that were chosen to select them, because they didn't include religious parents and religious consideration when they were thinking about introducing such seriously sensitive topics. You can even see in Justice Alito's opinion, right, it goes on to explain that one of the board members started to reference that in response to Lindsay's testimony that day at the board, talking about that there were bigots in the community and that there were hateful people. People have even gone on to say, you know, that there is unfortunate religious bias at hand here. Yep, you can see exactly that. And so it has been a long battle that has completely mocked and minimized people of faith in the country's most religiously diverse county. Montgomery County, fun fact, and it's again in Alito's opinion, is the most religiously diverse county in the entire country. And so it is still shocking to me the responses that are coming in that are completely tone deaf and disrespectful and hostile to those who hold their religious liberty and their faith so near and dear to their heart every single day, whether it's in school, at church, at temple, what have you, when they're at the grocery store. I could go on a soapbox, so I'll stop here.
So I have up on the stage this is from the opinion directly. So it says the board contemplated that instruction involving this LGBTQ plus inclusive storybooks would include classroom instruction. So it wasn't just that these books were on display. There was intention. There was a certain intentionality that these books were meant to spark discussion, and they were given cues. It says here that everyone would, one of the quotes, in fact, I think everyone would hope that discussion ensues. And in anticipation of such discussion, the board hosted a professional development workshop. I have attended probably hundreds of these workshops. I know exactly what happened. And the curriculum that they were using is Advocates for Youth, one that I am very familiar with, as I have been fighting it in Wisconsin for 3 years. It is the exact same curriculum that was fought. So there was such a contentious battle in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin, and it is used in several school districts in Wisconsin and across the country. And in the guidance that teachers receive, there are certain scenarios set up for the teachers. And here's one that is outlined by Justice Alito. If a student claims that a character can't be a boy if he was born a girl, the teachers were encouraged to respond, that comment is hurtful. And if a student asks, what's transgender? It was recommended that teachers explain, when we're born, people make a guess about gender and label us boy or girl. And sometimes they're right, but sometimes the doctors and the parents get it wrong. This guidance was encourage teachers to disrupt the either or thinking of their students, just like you said, Rosalind. So Cory, again, this is the kind of material you have seen and many parents have contacted you about. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think as an initial matter, probably a lot of the viewers today have already seen this type of content, but many of the parents out there have not, or maybe they've seen some, but not the most egregious. And I think a lot of them would be very surprised at the type of content that's often being read to or presented to, or with which schools are using to instruct their children. And two things come to mind to me is, well, a variety of things. So we're talking about opt-outs here. Most states have a policy specific to sex education that lay out the parameters for which parents will be provided notice when certain content will be taught and a chance to opt out. And that's generally it's pretty common in sex education. A lot of schools also have controversial issues policies, and those can vary. But in general, school boards will adopt policies that indicate, okay, if there's a controversial issue being taught, and they'll say, define controversial issue however they want to do that, then our policy is to let parents know ahead of time and give them a chance to opt out. Now, whether those are actually being followed is another question. But one of the aspects, if even schools that have those policies, generally they say, okay, and teachers, we as the school board are passing this policy that if you're going to teach a controversial topic, we want both sides. We want this to be unbiased. We don't want to indoctrinate the children or intend to persuade them. We don't want them to know what your views are as a teacher. If we want to present them with this content, then it should be unbiased. And with all of the content that you just put up on the screen, Scarlett, we can see that that was not the case in this case. And I had it in my notes too, is that if teachers perceive that children need to be corrected, that they can accuse them of being hurtful. If they say, wait, can a boy really be a girl? That they're trained to tell your child that they're being hurtful. And I think many parents would not want that to be happening to their child. The other thing too that I had in my notes about the majority opinion by Justice Alito was that what the parents seek here is not the right to micromanage the public school curriculum, but rather to have their children opt out of a particular educational requirement that burdens their well-established right to direct the religious upbringing of their children. And that's obviously under the free exercise clause of the First Amendment. So I think a lot of what we heard from the dissent said, well, oh my goodness, what is this going to mean? How possibly could this be managed and implemented? And it is a little bit more narrow, and it really is reasonable, and it is so grounded in these fundamental rights that parents, they don't want to micromanage the public school curriculum. They just want that right to direct the religious upbringing of their children and to not have them be persuaded to believe a certain thing that conflicts with their religious beliefs.
So I have up for everyone to see, this is again from the opinion, where Justice Alito is pointing out that in the guidance documents, teachers were told to basically be evasive with parents. This is a tactic that we have witnessed in Stevens Point, Wisconsin, with Gigi Stahl, an equity coordinator, where we had a whistleblower who recorded one of these diversity, equity, and inclusion, one of these instructional times, and it was also during the summer, where she basically said the same thing. Here's what we're going to tell parents. Here's what we're going to tell kids. Basically, if a child, raises some questions about when we talk about gender, transgender, and maybe says, hey, my parents don't agree with that, we're going to take the child away from the classroom discussion and then essentially make them feel bad, make them feel like what they're saying is bad and they're being unkind and they're not being respectful or inclusive. And that if parents have questions, basically to say, well, I'm just doing what I'm told. It's coming from the federal government, from the Department of Education. It's coming from the state government, from the Wisconsin Department of Instruction. I'm sure in Maryland. Oh, this is coming from the top. This is coming from, our state superintendent. And all of these ways in which they can attempt to deceive parents. And specifically, they say that at some point to a parent, if you don't want your child to be a part of this, you can, of course, keep your child home. But if you do so, that doesn't mean that absence is going to be excused. Rosalind, could you talk more about what happened specifically in Maryland?
So, I mean, that was exactly right. Once they took the opt-out away, you would not have an excused absence, right? And multiple times, many parents experienced where, and there was just a chaotic aftermath, right? Had you already requested it? Could you still keep it through the school year? Some schools were more militant about no opt-out, no way. Some were more lenient. And when you have a school district that has 160,000 students, right? Many of them, too, are English second language learners, farms, right? You have IEPs, you have 504s, the list goes on where every child's needs are unique and different. And we've been able to manage easily the ability to get instruction to a variety of different needs and a variety of different learning styles. This was a common sense solution, and instead of having a one size fits all. And so they tried to punish families for their faith in the name of diversity and inclusion and tolerance. They were extremely intolerant. And so I think it'll be an interesting journey as the board and the school district figures out how to implement this again. Hopefully they can do exactly what they did from the beginning, right? Which it seemed to be working just fine until they did an about face on it. And I'll add to that too, Montgomery County's own policy, and they noted this in Alito's majority opinion, that the Montgomery County guidelines for religious diversity, respecting religious diversity, they changed and narrowed the scope of respecting religious diversity, because the original guidelines, when all of this started in 2023, said that they would, within reason, accommodate religious diversity and being able to not participate in certain lessons in certain classes if it was in violation against religious diversity or religious beliefs, right? And they narrowed that and took out that accommodation when they went into the next school year. And so it's interesting that they did that to the religious parents. But mind you, if you go to the resource guide for Montgomery County Public Schools now for our LGBTQ community, our LGBTQ students can opt out of any class at any time for any reason and go to a safe space if they are feeling uncomfortable or threatened. And so there's a lot of hypocrisy going on here, that some students can opt out of anything at any time for any reason, no questions asked. But when that exact same thing is asked for religious liberty and religious families, it was quite literally taken away.
So that's really interesting. So that LGBTQIA plus students, if they felt uncomfortable, if there was instruction and they thought this is making me feel uncomfortable, this doesn't align with my values or my family's values, They had the ability to opt out, to leave, to go into a safe space. But for religious students, for students who held alternative religious beliefs to LGBTQIA plus instruction, they could not leave. They had to stay. There were no options for them, no opt-outs, and any if they were to leave, that would be considered an unexcused absence. If they didn't turn in assignments, that was considered, they weren't going to get a chance to do something else. They were just going to fail.
And that's still the lay of the land right now in Montgomery County. I don't think we need to pull up the actual guidelines, but maybe after the fact. Yep, that's the lay of the land still to this day right now in Montgomery County.
So Cory, after this decision, what can parents who are in that situation do?
Yes, that is a key question. What can and what should parents do after this? So parents, you have robust rights. The right to direct the upbringing and education of your child, specifically the right to direct the religious upbringing of your child. You have a freedom of religion long established under the First Amendment. And I know some of the questions that came up during.
Looks like we might have frozen.
Oh yeah, she might be frozen. And there was she did say that there were going to be maybe. Oh, there you are. You're back, Cory. You froze for a minute.
All right. Thank you. Sorry about that. I'm glad I'm back. But I just think it's important to point out too, before we move on to what parents can do, is that there were these other opt-outs available in the district, because part of the other side's argument, it's my understanding, is that, well, this just wouldn't be workable. This would be infeasible. It wouldn't be workable. Well, schools have the county, the district had opt-outs for other reasons. And by the way, every school in the country has managed to accommodate students with IEPs and services plans, and schools do this all the time. There's an educator who's very active, policy expert on Twitter, Daniel Buck. He has experience as a teacher, experience as an administrator, and he said, look, it's not that hard. Teachers can just say, hey, parents, send a note home at the beginning of the week or whatever it might be. We're going to discuss this book on this date. Let me know if you have any questions or want to opt out. Easy. And then for the parents that do, you just find something for them to do. If they want to go to the library or have another activity for 30 minutes or so, he says this is something teachers can do, and it's not that much of a burden for them to incorporate. So that, just expanding on that a little bit more. But for parents, I really want to encourage you all who are parents and guardians on this call to be proactive. One of the things that Will is going to be putting out shortly is going to be a template opt-out form. And I think it would be prudent, it would be a great idea to be proactive and get that opt-out on file. If there is instruction that you think would be problematic because of your religious beliefs, to get that in writing and ask to opt your child out and have that on file with the district, because now that we have this decision, those opt-outs have to be honored. And the other thing, we were discussing this internally recently, is under FERPA, you parents have the right to request the instructional materials for the classes that your child is in. So if you're curious about what is being taught, you can always make that request as well. I don't know if you need to if you have this opt-out, but generally you want to get that on file and say, look, the instructions on XYZ topics violates my religious beliefs, and I would like to opt my child out of that instruction. And like I said, we're going to have some templates at will-law.org in the near future for that, to make it as easy as possible.
And again,
Cory, let me ask, hold on real quick. With FERPA, parents can also, correct me if I'm wrong, please, request the teacher materials, right? And the teacher trainings that go along with the curriculum. Is that right?
Oh, I would have to double check that. I can't remember. Perhaps someone can comment and remind me if that's in FERPA. We actually at Will have a model policy on that, because I think 100% more transparency is always good. And the taxpayers, the parents should know how these teachers in public school districts are being trained.
I know when it comes to sex education and human growth and development, parents do have access to view all the materials, but the specific teacher teacher's guide, manuals, and instruction that I was able to get because I researched that curriculum. And if I think about in Wauwatosa, parents were able to have access to some of that teacher instructional material, but they had to go personally to the district office and review it. So they weren't given those materials by PDF. They weren't emailed those materials because of copyright infringement, but parents could go to the school or to the district office and they could see and view the materials, and they could take pictures with their phone. And so that is what a lot of parents have done. So you're going to have to make an appointment and then you can go see those materials. And that's as far as I understand. But so I know a lot. So it's kind of like, what next? But so I do have some questions because this material was not part of sex education. It was not part of human growth and development, was it, Rosalind?
No, these were books that were included into the English language arts curriculum. And so what's also interesting too, and I'll add, where do we go from here? In public recorded comments, the school district even said to the board that this is just where they were starting, right? With introducing these storybooks in the English language arts curriculum for our K through 5 students, right? Elementary school. But it was just the beginning. The intention was under the guise, again, of having a more inclusive, a more diverse Rolodex of characters and themes and stories, so that way all the children can see themselves and see their families in what they're learning in school. But they were going to implement, this exact same concept under social studies, under science, under math, under, wanting to have more inclusive and more diverse texts represented throughout different subjects. So this is just where they were starting. And so then the conversation will continue on as more changes to the curriculum evolve. And I think that that's a key thing for parents to think and process too, is that you have to really be engaged with what materials your children are using and learning from in school, right? If you're only looking at what comes home on the backpack on Friday and not, what books are coming home from the library or what's going on, what the actual books are that they're reading in class, you often don't know exactly what they're learning unless you're the one investigating it.
So in Intersection Allies, We Make Room for All, one of the books in question, a quote from that book is, "What might the future look like if all children were taught about justice, equity, and solidarity alongside the alphabet and arithmetic?" So this goes right along with what you're saying, Rosalind, that, hey, we're going to make math woke. We're going to make math progressive. We're going to have equity math. And Intersection Allies was a book written by activists, and the graphics are not great. There's no storyline. And this is a book for children that is meant solely to indoctrinate a child. There's absolutely no storyline. It is simply political propaganda intended to influence the minds of very, very young children. And it's appalling. It's absolutely appalling that so many on the left are even now going on air saying, oh, this is all just about representing some different families. It's not about that at all. There is intentionality behind this curriculum. It is meant to disrupt heteronormative thinking. And that was clearly put out in the teacher instructions and the board. And I mean, Rosalind, better than anyone, all those discussions, these parents weren't upset just because there was a book, Heather Has Two Mommies, Uncle Bobby's Wedding, just sitting out in a classroom. It was a lot more than that, wasn't it?
Well, it goes back to the instruction associated with it, right? It's not, and again, there was never the talk of changing the curriculum or changing the book. There's the irony, though, that the district on its own accord, going back to the fact that the people that they put in place to pick these books to begin with were and are radical activists with their own agenda, right? 2 of the books that were originally a part of the series have been removed from the LGBTQ inclusive subset because they were beyond reproach inappropriate. I'll give you the example of Pride Puppy, right? Pride Puppy was one that was moved. The word queer is written on the pages 4 times. What 4-year-old and what 4-year-old teacher wants to or should be put in a place to explain the definition of queer to pre-K students? This is, again, it's beyond reproach. It was to normalize and celebrate. To your point, Scarlett, this wasn't, Uncle Bobby and Uncle Tom are taking their niece Chloe to the Thanksgiving Day parade. It was to normalize and celebrate, right, the marriage and the union between 2 men, and that goes against deeply held religious beliefs of many people. And so they just went too far. They went too far, and the Constitution is on our side. Wouldn't you agree, Cory?
Oh, 100%. I think there is no question that based on the facts in the record in this case, that the district was intending to show one side of an issue and intending really to undermine the religious beliefs of families. And unfortunately, that's what we see so much from what I'm going to call the educational establishment. If you look at some of the national teachers unions, like the NEA, the AFT, they're more often, and that's putting it lightly, discussing things like social justice and inclusivity and diversity. They're talking about those things. They're not talking about reading proficiency, math proficiency. Are we preparing our students to be successful members of the community and setting them up for success? That's what we want them talking about. But it's so much more often these very one-sided ideological in instruction and curricula. And as you talked about before, it's being infused into things like English language arts and even math. Parents are seeing this. And if they're not, I would say just be vigilant, because it's in so many subjects in the school day. And by the way, and I think this is really, really, really key, my colleague Luke Berg was actually quoted in the Wall Street Journal today on this topic, because I think with this decision, we're going to see it expand beyond just LGBTQ curricula or even problematic curricula more generally. I don't know if you want to get into this right now, Scarlett, but I think
I would like to.
Yeah, I think 100% we're going to probably see this expand into some of those parental rights cases involving gender secrecy policies. And I'm sure a lot of the listeners are aware, but what I'm referring to when I mention that are school board policies, whether written or unwritten. We've seen these unwritten, that if a child believes they are the other gender, that doesn't match their biological sex, or if they want to be referred to as the other gender, that the school will agree to do so, use a different name and pronouns at school, and not tell the parents, keep it a secret from the parents, and oftentimes go back to using the biological name and pronouns to actively deceive the parents when they're around. So those policies are very widespread. We've seen so many, not just in Wisconsin, but across the country. We've litigated a few of these successfully. And I think with this Mahmoud decision, it's hard to see how parents would lose a secret gender transition case like that, at least parents with a religious objection, because, and then I'll stop for now, the courts rule in Mahmoud that any district policy that substantially interferes with or undermines the religious beliefs of parents that the parents want to instill, that's subject to something called strict scrutiny, which I can get into if we want to, but I don't have to. But if making kids listen to books on gender identity passes that test, then facilitating secret alter egos at the schools surely does as well. And we think that's a much greater burden on the religious upbringing of the children.
Well, you would think so, right? I mean, if reading, Pride Puppy and asking kids to find the drag queen or find, the leather bondage gear, and in Pride Puppy, and I don't have that right now. I have the image up from Eau Claire. This is a case that Will litigated where so many things happened in Eau Claire that were, that's been a hotbed of wokeness there. But there's secret transitions, secret teachers and counselors keeping secrets with parents regarding name changes and identity status. So much so that this poster was on the door of a school in Eau Claire. If your parents aren't accepting of your identity, I'm your mom now. So I would imagine if Pride Puppy is entitled to strict scrutiny, this certainly would be.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I will mention, we talked about parents being proactive, opting out of classroom instruction that conflicts with their religious beliefs. But I would suggest, too, that parents even opt out of any of these gender transition secrecy policies as well. And if the school won't respect an opt-out like that, contact a lawyer, contact an attorney at a nonprofit firm. You can contact us at will-law.org. Because this is obviously a really critical case that is also being litigated all across the country right now as well. And one of the interesting parts of the Mahmoud decision, Justice Alito indicated that we do not need to, quote, wait and see how a particular book is used in a particular classroom on a particular day before evaluating parents' First Amendment claims. We need only just decide whether, if teachers act according to the clear and undisputed instructions of the board, a burden on religious exercise will occur. So I think this does really open up the door for more parental rights litigation.
Also, and it's interesting, and Montgomery County Public Schools does have a secret transition policy. It actually was petitioned to the Supreme Court and they didn't end up taking it. But as of last summer, there are over 700 students who have completed that form. And on it, it ranks the children, along with the school professionals, rank on a scale of 1 to 10 how supportive the parents are. And then they get to determine whether or not the parents are a part of the support plan. And the reason that it was petitioned to the Supreme Court, they didn't end up taking it, but the 4th district said that there wasn't standing. So to Alito's point, though, they were saying you have to wait until your child is actually secretly transitioned and you're actually harmed by this before you are able to bring suit. And meanwhile, there are over 700 documented, thanks to a FOIA request and a friend sharing that with me, over 700 of these forms have been completed since 2019.
And wasn't that the case in cases that Will has handled, that there wasn't standing, there lacked standing or harm? So do you think now some of the cases that you've litigated or some of the complaints that have been filed from parents, do you think that some of those complaints can be revisited?
I think we'll have to wait and see how it plays out, but yes, in short, yes, absolutely. And I thank you, Rosalind, for bringing that up because, if you have a school district that has a gender secrecy policy, and that's undisputed, let's say it's a very explicit policy that indicates if your child wants to transition at school, then we are going to allow that and we don't have to tell you. Or in fact, Madison, Wisconsin, we are going to deceive you when you're around, essentially. And in that instance, what are the parents left with? If that policy is in place and they don't have standing, their options are essentially to leave their child in the district and perhaps wait for them to be harmed by this policy. But if they are, how would they know? Because it's being kept secret from them. And their other option is to leave the school district. So I do hope we see this get revisited. Yes.
So this is an old graphic. This is from last year. They're called transgender, gender nonconforming policies. And this, when Parents Defending Education was called Parents Defending Education, now it's Defending Education, these were their numbers. And those numbers have increased significantly. And so there's over 10 million students that are in schools that keep secrets from parents. And that's 10 million too many. It's outrageous.
This is another thing that I think a lot of parents that aren't following this as closely as we are, they would probably be surprised to know that these policies are in place and that they're so widespread. And by the way, most Americans, most parents, most grandparents, they don't agree with this. they want to be involved in their children's life. And one of the things that we've always said at Will, and many other organizations have said too, is parents want what's best for their children. 99.9% of the time, they know their children the best. They want what's best for their kids. They need to be involved in a decision like this. And another thing too is you think about your child being given medication at school, going on a field trip, given anything as simple as Tylenol. Notice and parental consent is generally required for those things. But to think that perhaps notice and consent to transition your child, even if it's just a social transition, different name and pronouns, treating your child as the opposite sex, that doesn't require notice and consent it's unthinkable, but it is very widespread.
Well, and this has taken it. Our teachers don't want to be responsible for this type of heavy. They didn't go to college. They didn't become teachers to get into the business of secretly transitioning. I have the highest of hope and respect for our hardworking teachers, and that we've created a culture where this is something that's added to cart into their already labor-intensive and noble-hearted work. I struggle with where district policies have decided to insert themselves into the role of parent and to burden teachers with that much additional and outside the scope of their work responsibility.
And here are some of the publishers of the books. And this does include PFLAG and Trevor Project, a lot of other organizations. These are books written by activists. The only exception to that I could find was Uncle Bobby's Wedding. The other books were all written by activists. They have forewords. They start with a message, they end with resources. So this isn't just, these books aren't meant to entertain kids, to cause kids to think about the world in a certain way. Like these books, a lot of times when you get a picture book for a kid, there's certain things that you want from it. They're learning the alphabet. So you focus on the letter and you try and get them to phonetically put the letter A and the phonetic sound with it. And in Pride Puppy, the letter is so tiny, and it's all about the imagery around it and the activism around it, such that the point isn't learning letters. The point is learning the message, the worldview. And so I've watched a couple really interesting YouTube with teachers that evaluated these books, and they really tried to evaluate them fairly. And they said, my honest opinion, and I don't want to be political about it, these books just don't qualify as good literature to have in schools. They are propaganda. And I think that's what parents are rejecting. There's sort of a creepy feel about these books.
Well, and the Supreme Court agreed, so it was a great day on Friday for parents, right? All of us, we're celebrating. Maryland feels like it's a wonderful win. We're so navy blue here, so this is a wonderful win. It's a reminder that your First Amendment rights and your religious liberty don't stop at the classroom door.
Oh, there was a question that I thought we should answer. Can you talk about the impact of this case for non-religious families?
Yes.
Go to church. No.
What did you say? I'm sorry.
I said go to church.
Hi, Julie. Thank you for your question. I think we touched on this probably a little bit with some of the gender secrecy policies. So obviously, as we talked about, for the audience here, this case is primarily, I think, a free exercise of religion case, that what the school policy was doing was infringing on parents' free exercise of religion because it was burdening their right to direct the religious upbringing of their child. And I think when we're talking about non-religious families, that second part is key. Because again, this case had to do a lot with free exercise and opt-outs for religious reasons. However, I think the fact that the court cited Wisconsin versus Yoder, which was also a First Amendment freedom of religion case, but it is a parental rights case too. It's part of the parental rights line of cases, which, by the way, go back all the way to 1925 in Pierce versus Society of Sisters. This parental rights right is not new. It's been around a long time, and courts have held that parents have the constitutional right to direct the care and upbringing and education of their children. Certainly, religious upbringing is part of that, but parents, regardless of religion, all parents have the right to direct the care, upbringing, education of their children. So even though this case was about opt-outs for religious reasons, I think, again, we're going to see more. We are going to see more litigation, more cases brought about parental rights in general. And hopefully what we see is that this is such a fundamental and important right that public school districts, government schools, they cannot infringe on that right and undermine your right as a parent to direct the upbringing and education of your child. So I think we're going to see that play out as well.
Well, I'm glad you brought up Pierce v. Society of Sisters, because at Moms for Liberty June, this is the last day, we've been celebrating it as Parental Rights Month. We've been working hard we did a press release at the Supreme Court celebrating 100 years of Pierce v. Society of Sisters. And so it was a culminating moment to see that legal precedent noted here in Mahmoud, right? That there was a coercive element there, that they were forcing students in Oregon to attend public school. And that was smacked down 100 years ago. And so it is alive and well and being used today in the same coercive slapdown.
Yes, we have been celebrating all of June. This is the last day. I'm going to put up Parental Rights Month. We've been celebrating the 100 years of Pierce versus Society of Sisters. And it was quoted a lot in this opinion, wasn't it? How many times did you count, Rosalind? Like a lot. And
when I did like control find for Pierce, it was 15, but that included like the footnotes and things like that. So let's cut that in half and say maybe 7. Yeah.
Well, I think that this is our generation's Pierce versus Society of Sisters. Mahmoud is now the landmark case for making the case for parental rights, and it could not come at a better time. Do you think, Cory, that do you think that this case, Mahmoud, will affect some of these other areas? You talked about that a little bit, but this is something that I know, and I'm seeing in the comments. A lot of parents have the same question. There are opt-outs, but the schools aren't following the opt-outs. Mm-hmm. There are gender non-conforming policies. There are secrets being kept. There are violations of Title IX. I know that's a different thing, but in the comments, there's a lot of parents are saying, hey, this is happening in my school district. What can I do now? And does this really affect, some of those more controversial subjects?
Yeah, to your first point, I do. And I'm excited to see what other impacts this has, because even though this case was about LGBTQ inclusive storybooks and classroom instruction, it's not necessarily limited. It was really more broadly about a burden on the religious freedom of families and children being required to undergo instruction that undermines the religious beliefs that the parents want to instill. So I think it'll be interesting to see what other impacts this decision has. To the question about, say you do everything right, you submit an opt-out, and you articulate it well, you communicate with your district and they don't honor it, contact a lawyer. I think you need to contact a lawyer. I think this decision is a very strong tool in our belt right now for religious freedom, for parental rights. And I don't know exactly how school districts will be advised. As we talked about, this case was largely about opt-outs, but what I would love to see happen is school boards take the initiative and say, we're going to provide notice. We're going to err on the side of transparency and parental notification, and understand that they are the ones that are directing the upbringing of their kids. And we're going to let them know, give them a chance to opt out. That's what I would really like to see. But if there are districts or that are really not honoring opt-outs or pushing back and refusing to comply with the decision, I would say contact a lawyer, contact us at Will or another attorney that does this type of work.
Rosalind, what do you think is going to happen next in Montgomery County?
Well, so they put out a statement that was, again, hostile to religious liberty, which is disappointing to see. They could have taken this opportunity to bring the community back together and figure out a way to recognize that you have a very religiously diverse community that you represent. You know, fun fact, right? We also have a very high Hispanic population here in Montgomery County. Only 1 in 3 of our Hispanic students can read on grade level. So I have high hopes because we do. In case you notice, this case went from Mahmoud v. McKnight to Mahmoud v. Taylor. We got a new superintendent during this, and we are thrilled to have him here. He is really doing the work to rebuild trust within the community. There is a great strategic plan on the horizon. I'm not confident that our school board is going to do anything other than double down on things like this, so we'll continue to have to advocate at the most local level of government. But I am confident, and many people are confident, with the new superintendent that we have here. And so we're optimistic for how this will be implemented, and hopefully they can be a beacon for how to do it well and how to respect religious diversity. We will see in August, right? We will see.
So Marcia McCleary, a friend of ours, and she is a Moms for Liberty chapter chair in Illinois. She just sent me a statement that Governor J.B. Pritzker just put out, where he says the Supreme Court's decision sets a dangerous precedent. When I signed into law LGBTQ+ history in our curriculum, I hoped schools would become more welcoming to all. We'll keep telling the world the whole story of our shared history in Illinois, whether through storybooks or textbooks. And so is he going to honor opt-outs? It doesn't seem likely that Illinois is going to comply. So.
Yeah, you know, I think I had not seen that before, but my initial reaction is that that's very disingenuous, because we see the teachers' unions and the opponents in this case saying, well, we're going to be inclusive, we're going to tell the whole story, but they're not telling the whole story. They're telling one side of the story. And it's, we already had a discussion in the beginning about how this is clearly biased and intended to silence dissent. So that's the first issue. But the second is, and I've seen some comments as well along these lines, this isn't intended to change the curricula for the whole school district or class or every other student. What it is doing is providing parents with the chance to opt their own child out of this instruction if it conflicts with their religious beliefs. And that really should not be controversial.
No,
that's a great place to end.
And look, when you see this is part of the curriculum for one book, you know, what are your words? These books, again, they're not entertaining, they're not beautiful, the graphics aren't great. They have a message. They're written to send a political message. And she, her, am, z, zer, trying on different pronouns, see which one fits, change them every day. Every day you could have a new identity. This isn't normal. This isn't healthy. This isn't healthy for a child. This isn't healthy for their psychological development. And I know that the religious values that I am training my children up in, this violates that. And it's offensive that this would be used in English class, in language arts, where instead they should be reading things that are appropriate and more age appropriate.
Yeah, and I think age appropriateness is obviously very important. And as you had mentioned, Rosalind, there are many teachers that don't want to be teaching these controversial, sexually explicit, gender ideology types of topics. However, they're being told that they need to from either the administration or the school board or whatever it might be. And I'm just going to mention quickly, if there are any teachers listening, I want to put on your radar the Teacher Freedom Summit. It's coming up in mid-July. July 16th is the day it starts. Go to teacherfreedomalliance.com. I am told that you have until July 7th to sign up. And I have a feeling that this case and sexually explicit instruction. I'm presenting there. I believe Tiffany Justice is presenting there. It'll be discussed in even more detail.
So the Teacher Freedom Summit, and that's a place where teachers can, talk with other like-minded teachers. They can get different resources that they're not, and these resources aren't going to be conservative. They're not going to be political. They're just going to be apolitical, because we're just trying to remove the politics and religion from public education. We're not trying to infuse it with a different politics or a different type of religious instruction. We're just trying to make these public schools sort of ideology-free zones.
Wouldn't that be great? Yes. So much of what we do here at Will is based on the Constitution and the rule of law, and that has come to be perceived as very political or extreme, and it's not, especially in education. I mean, I personally, we want school choice, but we want public schools to do well too. We want all children to receive a good education, and there are reforms that we can make that we'll be talking about, resources that will be coming out to try to help make that happen and to help parents continue to be involved.
I have a child in public school. Rosalind, you have a child in public school. I have had 3 of my 5 children graduate from public school, and it will be 4 children that graduate from public school. So I have a vested interest in public education. It is still the only option for the vast majority of American children. And frankly, my property taxes fund this education. And I want American students to not only survive through K through 12 education, but to thrive and to be able to read and to be able to do math, and think critically, not be told what to think. This is how you think if you're a good person. Instead, they can develop their own worldview, guided with, the instruction of their parents and then their own personal experience. The first 18 years, we have some influence. I have 16-year-old, 18-year-old, so how much influence I have there, I hope it's more than they convey to me. But and then our children they'll go on and develop their own worldview. But I don't want anyone telling my child how to think. In fact, the way I raise my children, I try to encourage them very young to think independently. And when I tell them something, hey, look it up. Don't just take what I'm saying verbatim. Do your research. And if you find something that contradicts what I'm saying, I'm open to it. Let me hear it. I will welcome debate. The fact that there is no debate in these classrooms is scary. The fact that children are unable to think that way when they are in pre-K through 5th grade, they're unable to form debates and challenge teachers or challenge concepts. I think that qualifies this material as political propaganda and indoctrination.
I wanted to give one more plug and then thank you, Cory, and then I have to hop. But Jenny Gentiles is saying that she's teaching or presenting at the Teacher Freedom Summit too, and she dropped a couple of really good links in the comments.
Oh.
So thank you, Jenny, for that. And Cory, thank you for everything you're doing at Will, defending parents. You're a public interest nonprofit law firm, isn't that right?
That's right. Yes, we are a 501c3 nonprofit firm. Thank you. No, we're very grateful to be able to do the work that we do, and it's certainly important work, especially in the area of education.
It is very important work in Wisconsin, and you guys, all the years that I have been doing this, you have been just a lifesaver. The work that you do, the cases that you take, the advice that you give, the resources that you put out have been so helpful to parents during this really turbulent time. So I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful, Rosalind, for you to take time to come on and talk about your case. And I was so thrilled and honored to be able to celebrate the win with you and touched by your response. Rosalind has fought a long time, and she has put her everything out there, her face, her name, her heart. And so I'm so grateful for parents like you, Rosalind, that, it takes a lot to go in public and in your county and to stand up for what you believe is right.
Well, thank you. I'm back at you. Ladies, I hope you have a wonderful day. Oh, but one more to Eve Potts, who is super triggered. Botox is usually like $10 to $20 a unit, depending on where you live. So I hope that you find a really good doctor.
I know right now there's no air conditioning in this room, and I'm like sweaty. I'm so hot.
Bye, Cory. Bye, Scarlett. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you, Cory, for coming on. Thank you, Rosalind, for coming on. And when I'm going to re-air this, and I'm going to make sure that I have links, everything. As a matter of fact, I've put on, go to will/gov.org, right? Or law.
Will-law.org, yes, and keep an eye out for some brand new Mahmoud resources and explainers that will be coming soon.
So look at the bottom right here. It's perfect. will/law.org. And there is your statement, your media release. There are the resources that you have, which are extensive. And then soon you will have specific to Mahmoud resources.
That's right. Yeah, we hope to release those this week to obviously, it's nice that it's the summer, but parents should start, thinking about this and make sure that their rights are respected when the new school year begins.
And so to close, call to action for parents to go to their board docs and talk to their superintendent, talk to their school board, and review their opt-out policies, correct?
I think that would be a great thing to do, is to understand, hey, I see that this new decision came out. Can you tell me how the board, are you revising any policies? Are you putting out any new policies to ensure that it is complied with and understand what they're doing? I think that would be a great idea. And then also just getting that opt-out on file, and we'll have a template for that soon.
Great. And so this will be a universal template. You don't have to necessarily do any state, a model policy. And if you have a more conservative school board, or, a more moderate or open school board, you can let them know, here's a model opt-out policy if you don't have one, or if you need to adjust it to reflect the Mahmoud decision. And then your next job is to review curriculum and find out what, as early as preschool. Say, can I go to the library? Can I review your curriculum? Can I stop in the district office and review lessons? And, show up, go to meetings, go to school board meetings, and be present. I can't tell you what a difference it makes when the principal, the staff, the teachers, they know who you are. They know, that's Sarah's mom. She's always in here. She's always sending an email and asking questions in a respectful way, of course, in a respectful way. I can tell you I have solved a lot of problems that you will never hear about on social media, because we've been able to do that without having to go to libs of TikTok or say, oh, woke alert. Lots of times, if you can just talk and develop a relationship, you can avoid contention and, be reasonable. Come, let's reason together.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. And the other thing too is if you go review the curriculum or ask to know what your children are being taught and see those instructional materials. And by the way, there's often so much more than the curriculum approved by the board. Yes. So I would just make note that instructional materials is more than just the board approved curriculum. Teachers often will create their own resources, share resources, show videos, etc. So just know that it's more. And hopefully what you see is uneventful. Like, best case scenario, there's nothing you object to, but it's good to be involved and know and understand. And then if there is something that's problematic, you can, connect with other parents and make them aware. And as Scarlett mentioned, be respectful, be reasonable, but of course you want to be involved and you want to know what your children are learning.
Yes. And in Wisconsin, we hold our school board elections in April. So start thinking now. Go to your school board website. See if there's going to be positions opening up, if there's going to be elections. Start thinking about that now. Prepare to run for school board. And that is something, there are a lot of organizations in every state, and I know Moms for Liberty will certainly help you. We have got a plethora of information to help potential school board candidates. And locally in Wisconsin, we've got the 1848 Project, and every state will have some other organizations that do provide resources and help you so that you can start to think about running for school board, run a successful campaign, start to think about the issues. And this will be a big one. This and Title IX, these are going to be big issues and potentially great issues for you to run on if there is a school board member that simply is just unwilling to be reasonable with parents. And I thought that was a something that not only Justice Alito, but in a concurring opinion with Justice Thomas, they just said it just got out of control. What happened was just out of control. This complete disregard of a whole section of parents in that school district, a very diverse school district. They were just basically told to go pound sand. Like, too bad. This school doesn't work for you. We're only going to cater to this small minority of activists, and the rest of you either are on board or go to a different school. And didn't Ketanji Brown Jackson actually say that? Hey, if you don't like it, just go to a different school. And
oh yeah, thank you for bringing that up. There was, both during the oral arguments and in the opinion, a discussion about that. And well, we don't have universal school choice in every state. Not every family can afford to send their child to a private school or can stay home with their child to homeschool their child. And I was grateful to see, I don't have it pulled up right now, but there's language in the majority opinion, I believe, to the effect of saying that that's not a solution. Saying, oh, if you don't like it, go somewhere else. We can't condition public benefit on the fact that parents must allow their children to be subject to this instruction that violates their beliefs. So I was glad to see that touched on as well.
Especially when children are mandated by state law to attend school. So they need to attend school. They're mandated by law to attend school. These schools are publicly funded with our tax dollars. And then to say, well, if you don't like the fact that we are radicalizing your children, you should just go somewhere else. And then she made another a comparison to the public transit system. Like, you don't have to use a public bus. There's no comparison. There's a very big difference between using the public transit system and using public schools. There aren't options for parents. For most parents, the public school, especially in rural areas, as you know, Cory, there are many rural areas where there isn't a private school option. There isn't school choice to fund that education. And a lot of parents can't homeschool their kids. So there isn't another option. And to violate their rights and to force a very radical, uncomfortable curriculum on young kids, it doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, honestly, it's almost insulting to hear that. Well, if you don't like it, why don't you go to the private school? Because yeah, as we've already touched on, not everyone can afford that. There's so many teachers, teachers union leaders, Democratic legislators who are very vocally anti-school choice, who send their children to private schools. And the disconnect there is just remarkable. Yes. Because they claim to help those that are vulnerable when really there are families out there of all different political persuasions who are unhappy with their local public school for whatever reason. If it has to do with certain ideologies being taught, the proficiency levels being low, whatever it might be, safety concerns is a major issue, and they would love to have a way out. But they can't afford a private school tuition in many cases. And to have individuals saying, well, just go somewhere else, wouldn't that fix the problem? It was good to see that acknowledged and say, no, that's not a real solution.
Well, maybe they could, all the time that they spent and money, think about that. In Montgomery County, they spent, I think, $2.5 million on this case, taking it all the way to the Supreme Court. Maybe if those funds and the time were spent on actual education and phonetic instruction, then our NAEP rates would not be so abysmally low. And American school children would actually be able to read at grade at the grade level. Our proficiency rates are so shocking. The fact that if a school district has a proficiency rate above 60%, they're considered like gold star. That's a failing grade, in my opinion. About 60% is a fail. That's not something to celebrate. And yet, in too many districts, that's considered an achievement, that 60% of kids in a district can read at grade level, because as we know, there are school districts like Milwaukee where Black children are reading at a grade proficiency rate of 4%. Stop focusing on woke curriculum and radical critical race theory and gender ideology and start teaching kids to read.
Right. Yeah. Can we teach our children civics lessons? Can we teach them according to the science of reading? Will is going to have a new report and model policy out soon on numeracy or math instruction. How can we improve that? And actually at our recent school board summit, we had a panel on civics instruction. These are the things that we should be talking about, and get back to the basics and helping these children learn. And with literacy in particular, if there is not a foundation for literacy early on, and there are many states now that have implemented reforms in alignment with the science of reading, but that impacts them in every other subject too. If you're reading music in music class, if you're reading a word problem in math, I think if we could focus more on these core subject areas, it would just really benefit the kids. And to know that the proficiency levels are so low, it really is heartbreaking. And then you have states like Wisconsin that change the standards to make it look like they're doing better than they are. And don't we want parents to know, communities to know how these children are really doing and how that compares from year to year so that we can make an improvement. But instead we see, unfortunately, some governments and government agencies taking actions to conceal how kids are really doing.
And recently you just had a webinar, correct, that had to do with literacy and reading?
We did, yes. The one that we just hosted was specific to the new reading law in Wisconsin. And I think it contained information that will be applicable in any state, though, because it had to do with retention policies and holding students back. And when obviously we don't want that to be the first thing that happens, we want to know early on, and there's so much more to it than this, but we want to know early on, how can we support kids with learning, with reading, so that they hopefully don't have to ever be held back? And how can we involve the parents, and what does that look like? So we have a model policy on that, and recently hosted a webinar on it too.
And Daniel Buck, he's a visiting fellow, right, with the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty?
He's not anymore, but yes, he was a senior visiting fellow with Will. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So I love him. He's great. He lives here in Wisconsin too.
Yes.
But he and several other teachers that I follow on X have said that they've also talked about teacher training and teacher instruction. And as we can see, the instruction that is being given to teachers is a little wacky. And instead, what they need, when I talk to teachers, they say they would much rather have more professional development that helps them to, in the classroom specifically, to help kids to learn to read. They would like to have more reading specialists on hand in classrooms. They would like to have more math specialists. They would like to have policies in which disruptive and violent students could be removed from the classroom and from the school so that they could teach. And so there's so many more important issues that we should be discussing. It's so unfortunate that we have to spend so much time talking about, Pride Puppy, instead of talking about the science of reading and the best books to use in a classroom for phonetic awareness for 6-year-olds. How can we support them in math? Like, what are the best strategies? And my hope maybe is with these decisions, and we can end it on this, is that we get back to the basics, and we just, I would hope that a lot of administrators and teachers finally have the courage to say enough. They don't have to think like me. They don't have to agree with me politically, but they have to be as exhausted as I am.
Yeah, I think to the point about teachers, you reminded me of if any of the audience is listening and is interested in more about that, it reminds me of a line by Robert Pendicio that he has said many times, that we have made the profession of teaching too hard for mere mortals. Teachers need a solid, high quality curriculum, and they need support and mentorship. And this is something that can be done. So the name I just mentioned, I know I said it quickly, Robert Pendicio, find him on Twitter, Google his name. He's written about this extensively. He's a great resource. But yes, Scarlett, I agree. I hope we see, and this is, I think, both legal and practical. I hope we see more of a collaboration between schools and parents. It has recently just become so adversarial, which is unfortunate. It's not good for kids. You want to be working together. You want to have more transparency. And with this case on parents' religious freedom and their parental rights, I do hope we see the needle start to swing back in favor of more of that collaboration, communication, and parents' rights being respected.
Yes, the real world experience of myself and most parents isn't one of viewing teachers as an adversary. I don't have, actually, I have a great relationship with my daughter's public school teachers. I think that in my school, most things are being done very well. And she's getting a very high quality education. And I am very intentional and purposeful about that. They know where I stand. And I'm also not trying to go in and be pushy and disrespectful. So it is possible to have that kind of relationship. And I think most families do. It's just, there are these occasions, there are these districts where, there's the clash, and it would be great. It would be great if more and more we could just have a good working relationship and a way to moderate and resolve differences so that, our kids didn't feel uncomfortable in the classroom, and also that parents didn't have to feel worried all the time. Like, what are they teaching today? What's happening in my kid's classroom today? How are they screwing up my kids today? We don't want that. We want schools to kind of, I don't know, be like they were when I was a kid, I think.
Yeah, if we could get back to basics, restore that collaboration, I think that would be a major step in the right direction.
All right. Well, I'll let you go, Cory. I know you've got a lot of work to do, and I look forward to seeing the resources that will come out hopefully soon. I know that parents will be needing them. And so what would you say, last note, what would you say to a parent that has struggles with their school district, that their child was exposed to materials like this, and maybe they never said anything, maybe they didn't know who to contact, but they may have a case. Who should they contact? What should they do?
Yeah, this Mahmoud decision, I think, is really key, because now we know if you opt out and their opt out is not honored, or if your child is exposed and you say, hey, I know you taught about XYZ the other day, I want to opt out of that going forward, and it's not honored, we now know that that's wrong, that if there is an objection, an opt-out request based on your religious beliefs, that the public schools have to honor that. And there's another line in the opinion about, okay, parents have religious freedom. If that didn't follow the children into a public school classroom, that would be an empty promise. So unfortunately, if there are districts that aren't honoring those, as I mentioned earlier, opt-in attorney, or too much talk about opt-outs here, but contact an attorney who practices in this area. We had mentioned earlier, will-law.org is our website, and there is an entire intake form on there that says contact a lawyer. Our team monitors that regularly. So if you send anything through there, we will see it. Can't take every case. As we mentioned, we're a nonprofit organization. We are relatively small. However, our attorneys will see that. We will review it. And these parental rights cases, religious freedom cases, these constitutional law issues that are arising, particularly in the K through 12 context, anything that now conflicts with the Mahmoud decision, those are kinds of things that we absolutely would be interested in getting involved with and would look at very seriously to defend your rights.
And do you think that right now you're going to be digging further into this decision, and you may find some new information for parents?
Yes, we have multiple attorneys. I think this is such a huge decision that even the attorneys here that don't specialize in education law, we are all studying this decision because it is a landmark case, as you mentioned, and it could have impacts beyond just what the facts of this particular Montgomery County case were. But we will be putting out a legal explainer, template opt-out forms. What should teachers do? What should parents do? How should school boards think about this? Because obviously we want it to be complied with, we want it to be easy to understand, and anything we put out is going to have very specific legal citations as well. I think that's really important too, so that if you're in a district that you receive a little bit of pushback, whether from board member, administrator, whatever it might be, that you have that legal authority and you can, be empowered to exercise your rights.
Well, thank you, Cory, so much for joining. This has been great, a great initial explainer of what happened, a little bit of context provided by you and Rosalind. And I think there is just celebrate, because parents are winning right now. This is huge. This is momentous. And we have more tools in our toolbox now, more than we did before. Next, we're very excited to see what happens with Title IX. That'll be our next live stream that we're going to have to do, because there's a lot of interesting things going on there with California. They're approaching their 10-day period. And so we're going to find out, is the federal government, is the Trump administration going to cut off funding to states that continually allow males to participate in all female categories of athletics in K through 12 education and colleges and universities? And so this is something we're watching closely. I'm sure you guys are watching it closely too.
Yeah, it is really great to see the Trump administration implementing Title IX as it is intended to apply, and to respect the private spaces, the opportunity, and the education of all students, especially girls. It's really good to see, and it's obviously another thing that we at Will are very involved in.
Yep. So there's still going to be a lot of news this summer. I'm sure we're going to see a lot of echoes of Mahmoud throughout the school year. And I think all parents should feel heartened, and they should be empowered. And that's what we do at Moms for Liberty, and that's what you do as well. You empower parents, you inform them, you equip them with the tools they need, and then they can go out and fight for their children and their communities. So thank you very much.
Thank you. It was great joining you and your audience.
Thank you. We'll talk soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.
So I'm just going to, and like I always do, I'm going to plug a lot of the cool things that we're doing, by Cory, with Moms for Liberty. In particular, I was just talking with Missy, and M4LU is gearing up for August. And in August, there will be an M4LU back to school toolkit. And the emphasis of August is going to be back to school. And no one does that better than Moms for Liberty. So we were just talking today. We've got a lot of cool ideas, a lot of tools that we want to provide to parents, particularly in light of Mahmoud v. Taylor. And so stay tuned for all of that. Tomorrow, or no, what's today? We're going to Wednesday. On Wednesday, we have the Fire of Liberty show coming up, and that is with Tina Deskovich. So stay tuned for that. Wednesdays, that's at 10 o'clock every Wednesday. And Tina will interview a Mom for Liberty, a leader, a chapter chair, and they will tell their story of how they went from, just like me, a regular mom, to a mama bear activist, parental rights activist, and how they made real positive change in their community. And I'm always inspired by those interviews. And again, go to will/law.org if you want more information about they have a statement about Mahmoud. They also have a plethora of resources for parents. They've got a great initiative. There's so much on their website. I use it all the time. Then, of course, if you are interested in joining Moms for Liberty or starting a chapter, please go to momsforliberty.org and join the movement. We would love to have you. We are adding members and chapters every day. It's so exciting. And follow Moms for Liberty on X at moms4liberty. And I would love for you to follow us and to share our materials. And that just only grows, everything that we're trying to do. And then I wanted to talk about one of our sponsors, Patriot Mobile. So you get a free month of service if you sign up now at patriotmobile.com/M4L. So please sign up with patriotmobile.com/M4L. And last, for more information about gender ideology, comprehensive sexuality education, restorative justice, critical race theory, all sorts of topics, go to m4lu.org. There is so much information. There are toolkits. There are links to articles. There are interviews. There are forums. There are town halls. Just so much information. And if you look at our social media, we just had on Saturday a live stream that might be of interest to you. Go to our YouTube channel where you can see a lot of our videos and live streams, and follow us on social media. So thank you all. And one last thing that I wanted to put out there. This is how we should evaluate curriculum that should be in K-5 schools or pre-K through 5. Pick high quality books. Center kids, not grown-ups. Teach books in the right academic subject, and don't force opinions on kids. Look at the books and think, what is their literary value? What is the story being told? How does this help a child think critically? Can a child see themselves in this book? Don't center grown-ups. Don't pick books written by activists. That's a really good tip. Because a book written by a political activist is going to likely have more political undertones. Maybe there are some rare occasions where that is not the case, but for the most part, I think that books in schools should be meant for children, and that's it. There shouldn't be a forcing of opinion. We should not have books that tell kids, if you think this way about LGBTQIA plus politics, then you're a good person. And if you think this way about LGBTQIA plus politics, then you're a bad person, or your parents are bad. And we should be aware of the fact that in a big country where there are millions and millions of people, millions of school children, we should be aware that there are religious values, religious differences, and we should do everything that we can to not force religious beliefs on another group of kids. And the recognition by the Supreme Court that this LGBTQIA plus curriculum has religious connotations and is delivered in a way that violates the religious freedom of other parents, I think, is just a huge win. It's something that I've been saying for 3 years and reviewing the curriculum. And this has been a great live stream. Thank you for tuning in. Going to do some more throughout the month, maybe the end of the month of July, where we are going to discuss more in detail some of these books, and so that parents can familiarize themselves with them and be able to challenge them, to make sure that they're opting out, that they know what to look for. And so this is something that I used to do in 2022. And I think with this decision, we need to get back to making parents aware of where to look to find curriculum, how to ask the questions, how to write FOIA requests, how to submit requests so that you can get more of an immediate response. You know, if you submit a request to your school board and it's like 2 pages long, you're not going to get a quick request, and you're often going to get a bill attached to that. They're going to say, oh, this will take so many hours to do. So keep your questions simple, and then build your questions based on the material that you receive back from your open records requests and your FOIA requests. And know where to look in board docs and clicking the links so that maybe you don't need to request everything. You can start doing some investigation on your own. And then when you come to a roadblock, that's when you can finally say, okay, I think I need to do an open records request and get some information and see some emails and all of that stuff. And those open records requests can be very successful and helpful, or they can take a really long time and you can feel frustrated. So there are strategies for this. Moms for Liberty deals with that. This is an issue that we're going to be dealing with more in the fall, but we already have a lot of resources out, and as does Will and a lot of other of our partner legal organizations there. And so opt-outs, know your rights, check out your school board, go to your school website, your school board website, go to the board docs, make some calls, find out, is there an opt-out policy? Read the opt-out that is provided to parents. And if you compare and you see the model opt-out that Moms for Liberty provides or that Will provides, and you think that's better, you use that one. Try and change it. Try to use the opt-out that you feel is better, that more adequately protects your child. Show up to school board meetings, talk to teachers individually, talk to principals, talk to your school superintendent. I know it can seem like a lot, but if you get ahead, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Get out ahead. Make sure that you're standing tall and you know your rights, and now that you've been informed and you've been equipped, now you can go ahead and be engaged. And so go forth and, fight for your children. I think we're winning. As a matter of fact, I know we're winning. So thank you for tuning in. This is the last day of Parental Rights Month. June. Well, actually, every day is a day to celebrate parental rights. But June 30th, it's the last day that we are focusing on, last day of our Parental Rights and Parental Rights Month and celebrating Pierce versus Society of Sisters. But remember, every day is a day to celebrate your parental rights. Those rights are given to you by your Creator. They are fundamental, and they are now affirmed by the U.S. Constitution and the highest court in the land, the Supreme Court of the United States of America. So be confident, be bold, be brave, and fight for your children. Thank you, and have a blessed day. Enjoy the summer, enjoy 4th of July, and spend quality time with your family. That's the best thing that you can do. Thanks. Bye.